right, give me just a few seconds here, Curtis, and we'll get going. Did it pop up that it's recording on your end?
Yep,
Okay.
set recording. Yeah, so you just gotta get it back into the presentation mode.
Oh, is it not showing that for you?
No.
I wonder if I hit share the wrong screen. Give me just a sec. You think we've done this enough? Sorry, everybody. We'll get started here in a second. There we go.
Changes every update. Yep,
Yep.
now it's good.
Perfect. All right. Well, while people trickle in, we'll go ahead and get started. First of all, thanks for joining us tonight. This is our Turkey Hunting 102 webinar. It's a little bit different than Turkey Hunting 101. If you took that on Tuesday with Lauren and Jason, that's very, just kind of going over basic turkey biology, turkey hunting regulations. But today we're going to put a lot of that into practice and talk about hunting strategies, decoy strategies, when to use different vocalizations, and really just make it a lot more strategic rather than just kind of going through stuff. So we'll go ahead and get started tonight. First of all, my name is Dan Stevens. I'll be one of your getting music from somewhere. Hold on. What in the world? Were you hearing that, Curtis?
Yeah, I think that was maybe intro music that was added at one point.
Oh my
So I think
gosh. Oh, when we
you
tried some
passed
elevator music.
first slide.
All right, how's that look?
There
Good.
you go.
All right, here we go. All right, so a couple reminders before we get started. First of all, sorry about all that. Your microphone and webcams are disabled. Yeah, those were some movie tunes, especially when there's like 8 of them playing at once, Michael. So your webcams and mics are disabled. If you have any questions throughout, drop them in the chat, and we'll be happy to kind of answer them as we move forward. But first of all, my name is Dan Stevens. I'll be one of the instructors tonight, and then this is Curtis Twellman. Curtis, if you want to say hello.
Hey, and yeah, Dan, you're not in presentation mode right now.
That is odd. It shows it on mine.
Mm. Just do exactly what you did last time. It worked. There it is.
Now?
Yep,
Okay. All right.
perfect.
I'm not touching anything else. All right. So tonight, again, we're going to very quickly kind of reiterate some of the ecology that was talked about Tuesday, as well as go through the turkey vocalizations again. Again, we're going to breeze through them pretty quick, but we want to just kind of set the stage, and we're going to use a lot of terminology as we go through tonight. And so we just kind of want to get that baseline that everybody's kind of starting at the same point. So again, we'll really quickly go through ecology and vocalizations, and then we'll transition to talking about decoys, talk about different strategies. Should you use decoys? Should you not? Should you use adult tom decoys? Should you use Jake decoys? There's a lot of different kind of nuances and opinions there. So Curtis and I will kind of go back and forth as we may have a little bit differing opinions on that. And then again, we're really going to focus a lot of today's talk on kind of the strategic aspect of things. So we're going to go through, here's how you roost a bird. Let's say you found a roosted bird in this location. What are some setups that you could potentially use? What are some of those outcomes that you can expect from those potential setups, and how can you adjust as the day progresses? So should be a really fun topic tonight. And again, if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat and we will get ready to rock. One quick thing, Curtis, we got a note about, did part 1 get uploaded to YouTube? Yes, it did. If for some reason it's not showing on YouTube, I will send out, when I send out an email tomorrow after this webinar with a link to this recording, I will go ahead and include the link to the Turkey Hunting 101 webinar in that email as well. So look out for that tomorrow morning. But take it away for us, Curtis.
Yep. And then we have the calling special, of course, coming up. So still on the docket. But let's talk about seasonal behavior. Spring and summer is what we're worried about right now. This is the most exciting time to turkey hunt, and that's why we have a special season in the spring. And this time of year, the toms split up for breeding season. So some of you probably remember in the winter, maybe you were late season bow hunting, maybe you were just driving around, seeing just huge flocks of birds and thinking, oh man, I want to hunt right there. And that might be a good spot, but come spring, that giant flock of birds is going to break up and disperse and all go into different corners of the country. So, may not necessarily be the best spot to hunt come spring because everything changes. Their home ranges can actually change by several miles between the winter and the spring. So, in the spring, summer, insects are key. You know, they'll eat seeds, they'll eat a lot of green stuff, they'll eat tubers, roots, but insects make up the bulk of their diet. Every turkey I've ever shot, I've always looked in its crop to see what's in there, and generally the most recognizable pieces in there are just grasshoppers by the dozen. So really rely on insects that time of year, especially for nesting. The hens need it to produce their eggs and healthy reproduction. So um, yeah, really cool. But smaller groups, and then going back to the fall and winter, this is when they're going to flock up into big flocks, help them to get rid of predators, watch out for predators. They'll also concentrate on really good food sources. So if there's a big standing cornfield or something like that, you may see those large flocks get up into there. The insects have obviously they've gone dormant. They can't find them that time of year. Most of the seeds have been eaten or sprouted or buried. They can't find them. So again, home ranges can be different quite a bit between the winter to the summer. Okay, let's go over some key attributes. Now, this is why we have our special season during the spring. This is when they're breeding. This is the exciting time to hunt them. Obviously, we do have a hunting season during the fall, but it's during sorry, I got pop-ups that keep popping up in front of here. But anyway, we can hunt them during the fall, but to me, that's really a lot more ambush style hunting. The exciting time to hunt turkeys is during the spring. This is when the gobblers are going to be displaying. They're going to be puffing up their feathers. They're going to be trying to look all big and fit and hoping that the hens come to them and will want to reproduce with them. So, gobbles, we've got the spitting drums, which we'll hear examples of the gobbles later. We can't really find a good recording example of the spitting drum, so we don't have that, but we'll go over most of the other vocalizations. Really exciting, especially in the morning time. Big, that's when it's kind of the reverse for deer hunting, right? We talk about the rut in the fall when deer's testosterone's going super high, it makes them do stupid things, makes them fight, makes the exciting really, or it makes the hunting really exciting. For turkeys, it's the exact opposite. In the spring, they've got their hormones going crazy. They're gobbling at everything. Any little noise in the woods might trigger them to gobble, and just a real fun time to be in the woods. If it wasn't for the ticks and mosquitoes, wow, it would be just the bee's knees.
What really gets me fired up about spring turkey hunting is, I've always had this adherent interest to eventually go do a Western elk hunt. And it just hasn't worked out in my life yet. Obviously, it's expensive. It takes some time to plan. Obviously, it takes some time to draw those permits. But this is honestly about as close as we can get to that kind of Western elk hunting where you're mobile, you're moving around, you're calling to the animals, they're calling back, you're trying multiple different sets in an individual day. And so for me, that's what really kind of drew me to turkey hunting at first, was just this idea that, hey, you get to kind of try this elk hunting thing in the Midwest in your own backyard. So it's really cool for that.
For sure, yeah, and that two-way communication, that we don't get hardly with any other type of hunting, where you're calling, they're calling back, just amazing. So really cool. But yeah, let's talk about these vocalizations, the main ones here, and we'll actually be able to play these so we can hear them all. We'll start with the gobble. Most people are gonna know what this sounds like, but we can go ahead and play it there, Dan.
Yep, a quick headphone warning. It might be a little loud, so I'll give you a couple seconds. 1, 2, 3.
So yeah, that's what we're really listening for. That's what the toms make. That's the gobble. This sound is made by male turkeys. If you really pay attention, you can actually tell an adult turkey that gobble that we just heard that sounded like a good mature bird making that gobble. Sometimes you'll hear a gobble that almost sounds like that, but then kind of trails off at the end, and that's a Jake doing their best to get a gobble. So um, but yeah, this is primarily during the spring, not 100%. I have heard occasional gobbles in the fall, but it's few and
Especially if
far
you get a
between.
warm day. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but in the springtime, I mean, when things are peaking, I mean, you might hear hundreds of gobbles in a morning. So obviously, this is a morning thing. And as far as using this as a call when you're hunting, it's kind of a last resort. And mainly, this is because this is what all the hunters are listening for. So especially if you're on, well, I shouldn't even say that because it's potential you could call a hunter to you. So wherever you are, using a gobble does have a potential to call a hunter towards your location. So use it as a last resort. I do carry one, and I only use it if a bird that I'm trying to get a location on shuts up in the daytime and he's not answering any other call. As a last resort, I'll do that gobble that sometimes get them to call back, but that's the only time I'll ever use that. The yelp. So this is the basic turkey vocalization. Gobblers and hens can make these. We can go ahead and play that. Yeah, that's your typical cadence, and that's what we're all basically trying to match when we're calling turkey. So no matter you're using a box call, a slate, or a mouth call, when we're doing a yelp sequence, we kind of want to try to match that cadence. And when we talk about calling to actual live birds, we don't usually want to be the first to call. We want to hear them and then almost mimic them. So listen to their cadence and do it right back to them. Now, a cluck. So this is going to be a more short staccato note. So if you think of Yelp is kind of like the basic form of communication, cluck is kind of like a hey, just a quick, like if you were passing your buddy in the hall, hey, what's up? Quick little one note phrase. Play that. And when we're calling, a lot of times we use these just to kind of add diversity and make it sound like a live bird. The bread and butter of your calling is probably going to be yelps at a distance and then purrs as birds get in close. But mixing in these clucks is going to make it sound realistic, lifelike, and who knows? I don't speak turkey language, but sometimes you say just the right thing and they come a running. So.
Yeah, it's weird. I like to describe it very much as more of like an art than a science, turkey calling, that is. And it's one of those things you can sit there and call to a gobbler. I've had instances where I'm calling to the same bird for like 45 minutes across the field, and you're just throwing everything at the kitchen sink trying to get his attention to finally come that last little bit. And sometimes it can be as simple as just making a random cluck out of nowhere, just changing up that cadence, maybe doing a couple clucks so you sound like multiple birds in this area. And sometimes that's just enough to get that testosterone cranked in that bird, and here he comes.
Kiki's not one that we're worried about in the spring at all. This is basically going to be a call that's used in the fall, kind of like a regroup call when the flock gets busted up, but primarily made by immature turkeys. And yeah, we can go ahead and play it here. So yeah, some people will use it as a change up in the spring, but primarily a fall call, and one that's usually tougher to do than the others because it is a little bit different sounding. So you got to get really high pitched on your mouth call, and I mean it's dang near impossible on the other calls. I don't know if I've even heard anybody do a kiki on a slate or a box, it might be possible, but not by me. The purr, this is, like I mentioned, probably going to be one of your bread and butter calls when birds are close, when you want to make enough sounds to make it sound like there are birds there, but you don't want to be loud and really give up your location. A purr is a great call to go to, just a soft rolling call that kind of indicates there's feeding, content birds around, which sets everybody at ease. See, it's like a soothing sound. You could go to sleep to that. You know, some people listen to the ocean or rain, but you could listen to turkeys purring. I think that'd be a good sound to sleep to. Somebody will make that tape now.
Yeah.
The cut. So this is just going to be a much more. This is a lot of times. This is when they're really excited. So they'll do a variation of this when they fly down from the tree, and they'll do variations of this when they're fighting, along with some really loud purrs. But this is like a loud, fast, erratic note. And when you're really trying to I use this a lot of times if a gobbler's henned up and I'm trying to make the hen angry. Cuts really seem to, I don't know, just be almost like a challenge. So we can go ahead and listen to those here. Yeah, it just sounds angry. You know, some kind of trouble is going to be had when you hear cuts like that, I think. So,
Yeah, it's got a lot of energy behind it.
yeah, yeah. So definitely not a call I start out with. You know, start out slow, easy, gentle, and only get to these more aggressive style calls like the cut when you have to. You know, make the bird kind of make you go there. Don't start with that.
Perfect. So again, we just wanted to really breeze through those vocalizations so that we kind of use these terms as we kind of go through some of these different strategies. We're kind of all thinking the same thing. So now we're going to transition a little bit to kind of decoy placement. And there's several different strategies that we're going to talk about today and kind of show some examples and maybe illustrate how we would personally use them. But one thing I kind of want to set the stage off first is a lot of my decoy strategy and my decoy placement is entirely dependent on the birds that are in the area that I'm hunting as well as the area that I'm hunting. And so there's a few considerations to really keep in mind, especially if you're just a hunter who wants to just put a turkey in the freezer. And for me, in Illinois, we obviously don't get a lot of opportunity for turkey hunting, right? We're talking, you may get one segment that's 5 days, your segment maybe 6 days, and we're only hunting from, 30 minutes before sunrise to 1 o'clock. So we don't have a ton of opportunity. So me personally, I'm not going to let a legal bird pass. If I get the opportunity to harvest a legal bird, I'm going to do so. And what that tells me right up front is I'm going to use a decoy. If I'm going to use a decoy, especially a male decoy, I'm going to use an immature bird. I don't want to use a mature decoy. And a couple reasons for that, but the biggest one is it is very hard to convince an immature bird in an area to come into an area where there's a dominant decoy setup, where he thinks there's a dominant bird. He knows he's not the dominant bird in the area. And so that you may not even see that turkey. You may start calling to him. He kind of peeks out, sees that big mature tom decoy, and he's gone. And so for me, again, I just want to harvest whatever I can that's a legal bird. And so for me, if I'm using a male decoy, I'm going to skew towards an immature Jake decoy. A Jake decoy is going to still pull in that mature tom, and it can still pull in an immature bird, where a mature decoy may only pull in other mature birds. So just kind of keep that in mind. And again, think about, your personal hunting opportunity, what you're hoping to get out of it, that kind of thing. But first, we'll start off with no decoys. This was fairly new to me when I first started turkey hunting. I grew up deer hunting. I hunted a lot, but I didn't really get into turkey hunting until my early years in college is kind of when I started to develop an appreciation for turkey and started trying to hunt them myself. And I watched some videos. I watched how people did it online. Back then, it was kind of the DVDs that you bought and watched. Everybody used decoys. So it took me a long time to realize you don't even have to always use decoys. And there are some instances where I prefer to not have a decoy. And actually, the last 3 or 4 birds that I've harvested in Illinois, I have not had a decoy. Now, I usually do bring decoys with me and leave them in the car just in case I want to use them. But personally, I like to hunt without decoys a lot of the time. I know Curtis, you're kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever actually shot a turkey over a decoy. I had a few years where I used a Jake decoy. Actually, yeah, I did get one, I guess, over a decoy, but yeah, all the other birds I've got with no decoy. So I like to be mobile and I don't like to
Hmm.
move around. And I've been spotted before when I get set up and then I'm like, oh, I got to put my decoy where it can be seen, and that's when I'm spotted. And then I'm like, well, I just shouldn't have a decoy. So yeah,
Right.
that no decoy.
And there are some advantages to having decoys. One of the biggest ones is it's going to draw that turkey's eyes away from you. Turkeys and wildlife in general are very good at narrowing their focus and pinpointing where a particular sound is coming from. And so if you're sitting there just calling over and over and over again, eventually they're going to start to hone in on your location. They're like, why am I not seeing what I'm hearing? And so oftentimes having a decoy can just pull their attention away from you, focus their visual acuity straight on that decoy, and it allows you to get away with a little bit more and potentially get it set up for a shot. So again, there's pros and cons to each. The biggest pro is what Curtis said. With turkey hunting, we are moving often. I may be in a set for 30 minutes. I'll see how that plays out. If it doesn't work, I'm up, I'm moving. I'm either going to go try to track that bird down and maybe circle around, or I'm going to try and find an entirely different bird. The less you have to carry, the more likely you are to hunt mobile. And unfortunately, with turkey, that's really one of the biggest tips to success is be willing to move and move a lot and move often. Now, one thing I guess we should say, we're kind of right up front when we're talking about not using decoys. You want to be in an area where if a turkey was present, an approaching bird would not be able to see it. So let's say I was in the middle of my front yard, mowed grass, just sitting there calling all day. If I didn't have a decoy, a turkey's going to again be like, why am I not seeing what I'm hearing? But if I'm set up on the edge with very thick cover behind me, where if there was a turkey in there, anything in front of me wouldn't be able to see it anyway. A lot of times that may cause him to come even closer and try to sneak around and try to look to see that bird that he's hearing, in which case it's going to pull it right to you. So keep that in mind. If you're not using decoys, you still want to have some cover behind you so that it forces that bird to think there's still another bird behind you. Hope that makes sense. Now, if I am using decoys, this is pretty much where I'm going to start all my hunts. And again, I mentioned this concept of just not a ton of opportunity. And so I don't want to spend the first day of my hunt educating and almost scaring the birds off. And as we kind of go through today, we'll kind of go through a roost setup. And let's say we roosted some birds, we set up decoys. If I'm going to set up decoys on a roost, typically it's going to be something like this, where I'm setting up a very unassuming decoy setup. I'm just going to have maybe one hen out there feeding in a field. Maybe I'll put a Jake behind her in pursuit, 5 or so yards behind her, just to kind of give a little bit of motivation for another Tom that might see it. He goes, oh, he's already got she's already got a male with him. If I want to breed her, I have to come and interrupt her now. So it causes a little bit of urgency. But again, on your first morning, especially in a new spot, try to be as unassuming as possible. Don't go out and just set up a fighting scenario that may scare off any birds. We want to try to match. You've been fly fishing, you've probably heard the term match the hatch, where we want to use flies that are mimicking what some of those natural insect blooms are at the time. I view decoys the exact same way. Turkey, their breeding behavior is very kind of up and down. You'll have days where it's very hot. You'll have days where it's kind of less. So you want to match that to the best of your ability. And if you go out there just guns a blazing and set up this intense scenario where, oh, they're already breeding, but the turkeys know that they're not breeding yet, it can kind of cause them to get what we call decoy shy. So I always like to start with either no decoys or a feeding setup that are very unassuming. They're not going to scare off any young birds, and they allow you a lot of flexibility. Now, this setup is not all that different than a feeding scenario, but again, you'll see as we kind of progress through these different decoy strategies, all we're doing is slightly increasing the urgency just a little bit of any Tom or Jake that's approaching. And so in this one, we're still set up like they're feeding, but we're almost setting up to where it looks like they're about to exit the food source. So if that turkey he comes in, he sees them, and he wants to try to breed with that hen, he knows he better come and do it quick because they're about to leave that food source and then he's going to have to go and chase them around. So you're basically still doing a feeding setup. You're just doing it close to the edge and make it look potentially like they're about to leave that food source and head back into thick cover.
Should point out that if it was me, I would put that blind in the cover.
That yes,
And
yes,
how bad that stands out. I don't know if I've ever met a turkey that would walk into that. I mean, if you left it up year round,
year
sure
round
they'll get.
potentially. Yeah,
But yeah, if that's a brand new thing, basically in their home range, so that's like somebody put something like that in your living room, you're gonna notice it.
yep. One of my first jobs was actually after college was trapping wild turkey, and so the way we did it, we set up what's called a rocket net, and so it's this giant net that was like 70 feet by 30 feet attached to rockets, and so we would put a bait pile out and let those turkeys get used to it, and so we were hiding in a blind so that we could watch when they hit the bait pile, then we could send the rockets, catch them, band them, do kind of all that kind of stuff. It took on average about 7 to 10 days for those turkeys to start hitting the bait once we set up the blind. Again, we would brush in the blind. We would try to brush them in with natural vegetation, but they know something's different. They don't necessarily know it's a blind, but they know something looks different. And so just kind of keep that in mind. I'm personally not a big blind user when I'm turkey hunting. Again, we kind of mentioned mobility is key. I don't want to have something that's, 20, 30 pounds that I'm lugging around, having to set up, having to tear down, having to brush in, so for me personally, I like to use the natural veg that's there, but it can be great if you're taking kids, if adverse weather, all that kind of stuff.
Or if you're super fidgety, because
Yeah,
they do.
guilty. All right, this next setup, again, you can see we're just slowly kind of increasing urgency. And so you can kind of view this as maybe that feeding setup is what you try on set one in the morning. Then maybe you try no decoys. Then maybe you try a walking harem set where they're leaving the food source. But maybe you're finding that that's just not pulling in the birds. Maybe the birds are landing in your field, they're looking at it, they're interested, but they're just not committing. That's when you can try to increase the urgency just a little bit and essentially use those rising testosterone in the male turkeys against them. And so we can make a setup where we're trying to mimic two birds actively fighting. Personally, I have never done this. I don't know if you have, Curtis. If I'm going super urgent, I'm usually going to go to a breeding setup, which will be kind of the next one we talk about. But I have seen people do this. I have seen it effective, but never something I've personally used.
Yeah, not with decoys. I've done the calls, trying to
Yeah,
rile up,
yeah,
but yeah, never with decoys.
and
When
a
I
lot
did
of that. Oh, go ahead.
seen, turkeys will come in and bat them.
Yeah. And a lot of it, again, kind of comes back to what I started this conversation with. It's how I want to hunt. For me, I'm not necessarily trying to find that trophy turkey. I just want to put a bird on the ground and fill my tag. And so this is a setup that will scare any immature bird around. Again, by that time of the year, they've probably been run off by the mature toms in the area. They've been beat up by the dominant birds. And so they know they're not the dominant bird. And so they may see a setup like this and just immediately turn heel and head the other way. And so it's not really a setup I like to use, but if I want to get super urgent, this is what I will use. And you can see this decoy looks a little bit more like a Jake, doesn't have a super long beard. Um, but what we're trying to mimic here is basically, hey, this hen is being actively bred at this moment. And so hopefully that creates the ultimate urgency from any Tom or Jake that's approaching that says, oh, if I want to breed that bird, I literally have to go interact right now. And so the theory is then they run over here and start attacking the Tom, hopefully giving you the shot. So again, if I want to be super urgent, super aggressive, this is personally the decoy strategy I will use. But again, all we're really doing with this is setting a submissive hen. And the nice thing about hens or just decoys in general, you don't have, when we say use a feeding hen, you don't have to go buy a feeding decoy. They have a lot of times they'll have holes on the back that allow you to change the orientation of what that hen decoy is going to do. And so in this case, all we're doing is setting it on the ground without a stake. And you basically just created yourself a submissive hen instead of having to spend, $50 or $60 for an additional decoy that then you have to carry out in the field with you. So for me, I like to use the same decoys and just kind of augment them as much as possible. So I'm only usually carrying two if I'm carrying any. It's going to be a Jake and it's going to be a hen. And those are usually all I'm carrying if I'm carrying any. But again, this is kind of that ultimate urgent strategy I'll use if, especially as you get later in the year, maybe you have a segment 4 or a segment 5 permit. A lot of those toms are going to have bred, and so they're going to be a little bit decoy shy. They've been called at. They've seen decoys. They've been hunted. They start to pick up on this, especially on public land. And so sometimes trying something like this that's a little different that every other hunter may not have tried can be that last little thing that gives you just an extra couple percent chance of bringing that bird in. Now, one thing I do want to say just before I forget, if you're on a lot of social media, you'll see this new kind of trend in turkey decoys, which I think some of the brands are called like Reaper or something like this, but it essentially looks like this decoy you see here on the screen, but they're mounting it to their shotgun and they're essentially hiding behind it. Please don't do that. That's about as unsafe as you could possibly be. You're basically putting the thing that everybody else is looking for right in front of your face. So let's not do that. Keep those decoys on the ground. And another safety consideration, when you're carrying decoys, when I'm setting up decoys, I'm going to have some kind of blaze orange. A lot of times I'll just have an extra hat, or some of the turkey vests will have like a little orange flag you can just quickly pull out. When I'm interacting with my decoys, I'm going to have some kind of blaze orange on, just really quickly, put them up, take that blaze orange off, and then go get hunkered down and set up. But I want to have a little bit of safety when I'm out there interacting with decoys. Now, one thing we should kind of really highlight is this concept of hanging up. And we'll kind of get through this, especially as we get into the strategies, but something you'll see a lot, especially when you're using decoys. And this is kind of why I have stopped using them so often, is you'll have what we call a tom gets hung up. And so typically, I personally like to have my decoys about 15 or 20 yards away from me in anticipation that tom or Jake is going to hang up 10, 15, 20 yards beyond my decoys. So I want to have those decoys close enough to me that if he hangs up that distance, he's still within my effective range. If I have my decoys out at 30 yards and he hangs up, 20 yards past my decoys, well, now he's at 50 yards and he's well outside my personal effective range with my equipment. So I want to keep those decoys nice and close. That way, if he does hang up, he's still going to be in my range. And what I mean by hang up, how's the best way to say this? Look at this picture here, this bird, this turkey. He's colorful, he's flamboyant. So who do you think is doing the main courtship display? Is it the hen or is it the male? It's the male. And so in reality, what a male wants to do is he wants to get in the middle of a field where anything can see him, and he's going to strut his stuff. He's going to gobble. He's going to brighten all the colors in his face. He's going to get fired up. But what are we trying to do? We're trying to almost do the opposite, right? He's hoping the hens come to him, and we're trying to convince him to come to a hen. And so what happens often when you're using decoys is he's going to hang up 15, 20 yards past your decoys and wait. And what he's waiting for is he's waiting for that hen to make that last little bit of commitment. So keep that in mind when you're setting up decoys. All right, Curtis, you want to tell us a little about roosting? Probably the most fun you can have scouting.
Yeah. And so this is all about, this is not something that's 100% mandatory, but this definitely will help your success, especially if you're hunting a new area and you don't know where the turkeys might be. Go out the night before, and oftentimes right when the turkeys fly up, they will let out a gobble naturally. You can also go ahead and use your locator calls to try to get them to gobble more, but I generally like to try to get there before dusk and just wait, and hopefully they're going to gobble naturally. If they don't, and it starts to get dark enough that I think, turkeys are probably in the trees, then start hitting your owl hooter, and hopefully you can get them to call. And then if they're in a place where you can't quite tell where they are, go ahead and go 100 yards or a couple hundred yards away and try to get them to gobble again, so that with two spots it makes it a little bit easier to kind of triangulate in on their location and tell where they're at, so you can develop a plan to move in on them in the morning. So just a tip, make sure they are roosted. You don't want to try to do a locator call and make them gobble too early, because they could be walking to their roost, and then you're developing your plan thinking that they're roosted over here, but they continued walking and now they're roosted here, and you're walking in and you spooked them off your roost and your hunt's
Guilty.
over. So
Guilty.
Definitely make sure you're fully roosted. Make sure it's dark, before you leave, so you know where they are. And if you're not hearing anything, we don't have much time. Obviously, this is a narrow window to get them to gobble because once we get, well, I don't even know, but probably 15, 20 minutes after dark, it's a lot harder to get them to gobble. Once they fully wind down, then they seem to, it's almost like yourself when you fully fall asleep and it's a little bit harder to wake you up. But then when you get closer to wake up time, just the slightest peep and you're like, oh, I'm up, I'm up, I'm up. Same thing with turkeys. So you want to get them to gobble pretty much within 30 minutes of them flying up, or it's you're probably going to have to wait till morning. And if that happens, it's not the end of the world. If you don't get to roost them, or if you go out there and maybe it's super windy, you don't hear anything, that you could do the same process bright and early in the morning, get out there as early as you can and wait, and hopefully they gobble early, and they gobble early enough that you can develop a plan before shooting time right there in the morning. I've definitely done that more times than not.
That's my preferred technique too. And again, a lot of it comes down to time, resources. So again, I'm a public land hunter. So the area I hunt is 45 minutes to an hour away from me. That's a big commitment to go out there for 15 to 20 minutes of just roosting when I have found just as much success getting on them first thing in the morning and locating those roosts and going after them. So again, I will implore you, if you want to just experience one of the coolest sounds in the woods, give it a shot. It's a lot of fun. It's cool. But there are a few caveats I want everyone to keep in mind. One of the biggest ones is if you're locating a roost, please do not go too close to the roost. And what I mean by that, I personally do not want to see that bird in the roost. Turkeys have incredible eyesight. If you can see them, you can be assured they're seeing you. So that's one, all you're doing is educating those birds. But two, we want to leave them up in the tree. If we spook those birds off of the roost and they end up flying down early, not only one, are we opening them up to increased predation, more moisture that's just on the ground naturally during the spring increases the chance of death. But also, we're basically getting rid of the whole point of roosting, right? The whole point of roosting is to basically put them to bed so we know exactly where they're going to be when we show up in the morning. And so personally for me, I like to stay 200 to 300 yards away, and I do not want to visually see those birds in the tree. But we want to anticipate where we expect the birds to fly down. This is where it gets a little challenging. And this is where a lot of times it just comes down to a little bit of luck, but also understanding turkey behavior and turkey biology a little bit. Now, one of the easiest ways, if you see that turkey fly up to the roost, chances are it's going to follow the exact same path in the morning and fly down to just about the exact same spot. So if you happen to see that, you're in great shape. But think back to the biology of a tom. What is he hoping to do? He's hoping to get into an open area, show off his stuff, strut, gobble. He wants to be seen. So typically you're going to see them fly to more open areas rather than, into dense vegetation. Now, if they're on the side of a ridge, usually they're going to fly down to the high side of the terrain. Okay. So keep that in mind as well. Again, open ridges, pastures, clear cuts, any of these openings, that's where I like to focus a lot of my attention.
They will roost in about any trees, but in some of the studies that have looked in selection, it's about 50% white oaks. So the other 50% is a mix of everything, but they seem to prefer white oaks for roost. And makes sense if you just look at the structure. White oaks tend to have a lot of very horizontal and sturdy branches that are kind of at the appropriate height. So good roost tree for
And
them.
we got a good question here, Curtis. Is a crow call an option for roosting in the morning? Absolutely, yes. And then, Curtis, I'm going to take the second one for you. Any tips on mimicking a coyote yelp or howl for roosting?
And I would probably do other calls just because you are mimicking a call of a predator of a turkey. So I'm sure it does work and it's loud. I guess me personally, I would just choose a different sound to make. I would take a goose call or a peacock call or something. But if you do take your diaphragm call and not necessarily for a locator call, but maybe just so that you can use it as a predator call, if you work with that, you can get it to where you can make a pretty decent coyote howl on the mouth call. It's almost just like the key run. If you can get that sharp, high-pitched key, you just turn it into a little yip and add some growls in there, and you pretty much sound like a coyote. So if you are there for the calling webinar, I'll make sure and do that in that one.
Perfect. Yeah, and again, when I'm out there roosting, again, I don't do it a lot. I'll usually do it like I drew a second season this year. I will do it before the first day, and a lot of that's just I have the excitement. I'm energetic. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to have some fun. But what I'm more interested in when I find an active roost, obviously, one, I want to try to figure out where I expect them to go. But more importantly for me is how can I approach that roost without those birds seeing me? So look at your entire path. Don't look at just when you get close to that area. Think about using some topologic features to cover you. Maybe you have some really hard edge where you have a really thick stand of woods that you kind of use to conceal your approach. When I start to get within 300 to 400 yards of a roost in the morning, I'm going lights off. I'm not using a headlamp. I'm usually just kind of going by the darkness and the lightness of the moon. Normally that's pretty pretty well lit this time of year, so you can get away with it. But I'm very conscious of educating these birds because again, especially I grew up deer hunting, right? So I'm used to thinking of things on the ground, and so it's entirely different ballpark when that animal is 150 feet up in the tree and has some of the best eyesight in the animal kingdom. And so I want to try as much as possible to conceal myself on that approach to that roost in the morning. So those are the kind of things I'm thinking about while I'm out there roosting is one, where are those birds at? How can I approach that area? And then what do I want to bring the next morning? Do I want to try decoys? Do I not want to? So think about all that when you're out there. Don't just get so hyper fixated on, oh, is that bird in that tree? Really think about the entire process while you're out there. And take notes. Take notes. There's been many times where I get home and I'm like, crap. And you got to start over. So take notes. Notes are good.
And for me, one of the best ways to conceal my approach is to make sure that I'm early enough. Because turkeys do have awesome, awesome eyesight, but they need light. They don't have very good nighttime eyesight at all. So if there's no sunlight at all and you're moving like an animal, so stopping, starting, they can't tell whether you're a possum, a raccoon, a wild boar, a Sasquatch, Mothman. You could be anything. Turkey can't tell as long as it's dark. As soon as we start getting a little bit of light and you start getting close, they can definitely tell. And turkeys are smart enough to know that just that's an unnatural noise. That's enough to scare them. So never just tromps through the woods like a human when you're turkey hunting. That's a sure way to alert every animal in the woods that you're there, and they should be on high alert.
Yeah, well, humans just have such a consistent gait, a consistent pace that it's just a dead giveaway. Where, like Curtis said, every other animal out there, they're wandering, right? Or they're stopping, they're starting. Even when I'm deer hunting now, this is kind of something new I've started doing the past few years. I will walk to my stand that way. So many hunters, and again, I was guilty of this for decades. I just walk at a consistent pace straight to my tree stand. Now I take some time. I stop. I wander around a little bit, just again sound a little more natural because the woods are not they're not quiet. They're not naturally quiet. So just try to fit in as best you can. But this is one of the areas that I roost birds in pretty regularly. This is a piece of public land here in East Central Illinois. But what I want to show is I'm using a lot of parking lots, right? I don't, again, we're talking a very narrow window here. You may have 15 to 30 minutes if you really stretch it to actually roost birds when you know they're up in the trees, but it's not too dark to where they're still actively gobbling. And so I'm using a lot of parking lots and roads to the best of my ability so I can maximize, like Curtis said, that triangulation effect. And so essentially what that allows me to do is get to a parking lot, walk in, maybe 100 yards or so, hit my locator call, and I will pull out my compass and literally just take a compass bearing and draw that line on a map. I will go to the next parking lot and do the same thing, draw a line. Now I have two converging lines that, again, I don't necessarily need to know exactly what tree that bird's in. If I can pick it's in that stand of trees, for me, that's normally enough. And so a lot of times just this concept of a little bit of triangulation really gets me a lot of the information I need without me having to go in and really disturb that roost.
Yeah, to me, like if you know the bird's in that corner, you know basically exactly how to hunt it because you got that road to the south that
Yep.
doesn't 100% have to be a barrier, but it probably is a barrier. So if you are in that parking lot up there to the north and you just travel straight south around that wood line and set up right there anywhere on that corner, you're very likely to have an encounter with that bird because he's more than likely going to fly down into that open field to roost, and then he's going to continue on walking towards the west and probably curl up north. And if you're anywhere in there, you're going to have a real good shot. And if you don't, you're going to gather the intel you need so that on day two, you're in the right spot for a shot.
Well said. We have a question about tree stands for turkey hunting. Not something that I use. And again, the biggest reason why is I like to be very mobile. And so let's just say this specific scenario here. This is actually a hunt I had a few years ago. Again, piece of public land, and I basically did exactly what Curtis said. I was set up basically. You can kind of see. Can you see my mouse cursor, Curtis?
Yep.
Okay. And so you can essentially see this almost funnel. So if this turkey wants to come out to these big fields, he's going to come through that funnel. It just creates this natural corridor that kind of naturally forces him to walk through there. Where if you just have this big expanse, he can go anywhere. So I like to focus on these areas that have funnels and pitch points, but it never works out as you 100% plan. Again, we're dealing with wildlife where they have their own personalities, their own behaviors, their own experiences, and so they're all a little bit different. And so that's exactly what I was anticipating was a bird to come straight through this funnel, basically right in my lap. I had my decoy set up behind me so that he had to walk past me to interact with my decoys. And what did he do? He flew down off the roost, gobbled here for maybe 5 minutes on the ground, hung up past just about right here. And then what did he do? He dipped in and came and started working in these fields to the north. Now, if I was in a tree stand or in a ground blind or something that's a lot bigger or that I have to take down and disassemble, I wouldn't have been able to do what I did. But what I was able to do is basically just grab my decoys, throw them in my pack, make a beeline around to this side, and basically got set up right in this little finger here, hid, sent my decoys out here, and he worked his way basically on the north side of that timber line, and I was able to harvest the bird that way. So again, if I was in a tree stand or a ground blind, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And so for turkey hunting, mobility is very, very important. And that's why safety is very important too. Again, we're not wearing blaze orange. Turkeys see great color. So we're wearing full camo, face mask, gloves, the whole shebang. But when I'm making a move like that, again, I'm going to throw on just a little blaze orange hat just to let everybody know in the area they can see me. But once I get to where I think that bird can see me, that goes back in my pack and I get set up. But to answer your question, not necessarily. And again, just because of mobility. But if you want to try it, there's nothing that says you cannot try it.
I would say your shot angles are going to be very difficult from
Yeah.
a tree stand with a shotgun. You'd almost be better off with a bow. That might be great for a bow, but do remember that since most of your hunting time is going to be in the daytime, when the turkeys are close, if you're calling from a tree stand, that definitely will probably be enough to trigger something being wrong. I mean, I guess I haven't tried it a ton, so I don't know that for sure, but it seems like they'd be able to pick that out.
Yeah. Again, they're very good at picking out where a sound is coming from. I mean, it's frustratingly so. I kind of already walked through this, so I'll move through this pretty quick. But this is how I set up in that area first of all. And what I really want to illustrate with this specific picture and map here is look at my decoy placement. It's not between me and the birds; it's beyond me. If I put those decoys, right out here between me and that bird, well, now that doesn't cause the bird to come across me or come by me in any way, shape, or form. That gives that Tom a perfect ability to hang up outside of my effective range. Where if I put those decoys beyond me, one, not only is it taking the eyesight off me, it's forcing that bird to look beyond me at those decoys. It's giving him some visual stimulus to look at. But two, if he wants to interact with those, he's going to walk right in front of me. And so when I'm setting up decoys, I'm normally always positioning them slightly beyond and slightly past me. Again, concealment is literally the key to success for all of this. Turkeys, again, have incredible eyesight, but what they're really good at is picking up on movement. And so movement is going to be your key. Learning what movement you can get away with, learning when you can get away with movement. A lot of times when I'm positioned and I'm expecting that I'm working a tom in a field, I'm already set up. I already have my gun on my knee to where all I have to do is literally make just a couple degree swing if I have to. I don't want to have to pick up a gun off my lap, get set up, mount it. A turkey's going to bust you every time you do that. So this whole time, I'm very cognizant of being as set up as I can so that when that opportunity comes, I don't have to move much, if any, at all, because that is what's going to give you away. All right. So hunting near the roost. So again, with this scenario, we're kind of talking like we've actively roosted some birds. So what are we going to do? Now, this is where every turkey hunter you talk to is going to have a different opinion on how they kind of play this out. But for me personally, I never, never, never want to be the first turkey talking in the woods. I want to let the woods naturally wake up, let the turkeys naturally start talking on the roost. Then I might do a very, very minimal talking. Now I know Curtis does a little bit more calling when the birds are on the roost. I personally like to wait till they're on the ground to the best of my ability. But again, I never want to be that first bird that's talking in the woods. I want them to naturally wake up. You'll hear them. They'll start gobbling. They'll gobble. You'll hear a few gobbles early. Then it'll pick up, and then you'll start to hear some tree yelps. When I start to hear some tree yelps, so that's the hens talking in the trees. That's when I'm really going to start my calling.
Yeah, I definitely wait for them to start talking first, but I definitely make sure I call as quietly as I can while they're in the tree because I feel like they sound more quiet when they're in the tree, and that makes it harder for them to pick out where I am. So I like to get close to the roost if I can do it safely, get close enough that I can see what's going on, if nothing else, so I can plan my next day's hunt. And so I do like to get them a little bit excited in the tree if I can. If they're not paying attention to me, then I will just shut up and see what happens. But if they start talking and then I give a little and they start gobbling and get excited, then I'm going to wait a little bit and give them another chirp, chirp, chirp and hope they give me another excited gobble back.
And now this slide again, there's a lot of text here, but the big point I want to illustrate, and again, we'll kind of go through these, but the big point I want to illustrate is when I first started turkey hunting, I thought it was the roost hunt or that was it. That was if you watch a lot of the hunting content on TV, back in the day when the movies were out, the DVDs and such, every single turkey hunt you watched was this roost hunt that they shot the bird within 20 or 30 minutes. And so I assumed, oh, if that roost doesn't play out, well, I guess I'm done for the day. That's just how turkey hunting is. But in reality, since I started to really dive into this and just kind of become super passionate about it, I would say 90% of the turkeys I've killed have actually been between like 10 and noon. Again, I don't put a lot of emphasis on my roost hunt because I've found really good success in that midday, and that's kind of how I like to hunt, where it's a lot more mobile. I'm running around, I'm having this chess match with the bird. But what I really want to emphasize is if that morning roost doesn't play out, don't get super bummed out. I have noticed the amount of people on public land that are like already back at their trucks and heading home at 9 o'clock is a little astounding because again, I think there's still a ton of really good hunting left in that day. So there's a couple things that can happen when you're on a roost hunt. The tom can leave and he can come your way. He flies down off the roost and he actually is interested in you. And that's when I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. If whatever I'm doing is working, I'm usually going to stick with it. I'm not going to throw a curveball and try something different. If he's coming in and I'm talking to him a certain way and he's interrupting my yelp sequence with a gobble every time, I'm just going to keep doing that same thing. Now, if he stops gobbling for whatever reason or he hangs up, that's when I might try, okay, let's do a little purring, let's do a little cutting, let's do a little clucking, try to change it up. But again, if it's working, stick with that call sequence that works for you. What I have seen happens a lot on especially a lot of my roost hunts is the tom's going to stay with the real hens. And so think about why a tom is roosting where he is. A lot of times he's roosting in a particular spot because he's roosted near a hen roost. And so he watched that harem of hens go up to the roost. He watched them fly down. So he's going to go interact with them in the morning. It can be very challenging to pull a real life tom away from hens across the field when you're just sitting over there. And so a lot of times I'll just kind of let that play out. I won't interrupt. I'll just watch, enjoy the spectacle, enjoy the morning, let them go off and do their thing. That happens quite often. And that's when you can try to change up your strategies a little bit. Now, in a scenario where that happens, that's what we call henned up. That's what, when Curtis said a few minutes ago, he was talking about the cut vocalization. That can be really effective on a henned up turkey, because essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to tick off that dominant hen that he's with. So instead of calling to that tom like we have been all morning, I'm going to switch and I'm going to start calling to that female. And the way we do that is what we call kind of a boss hen strategy. So she's going to be yelping. Every time she yelps, interrupt her. Just get louder, get more agitated, cut her off. When she starts yelp, you yelp louder. She starts yelp, you cut inside of her yelp, and you really just start to tick her off. And eventually, the theory is now she thinks, oh, I got to go run off this other hen who's trying to be the dominant hen in this area, even though I am. And hoping that hen now comes, and guess who's coming right alongside her? Tom. So again, that's kind of the theory. But if you're in a scenario where you have a Tom or Jake and they're with hens, that's the strategy I like to use. Anything to add on that, Curtis?
No, yeah, that's exactly what I do, and it's just kind of like if you remember back to high school, if somebody yelled fight and everybody runs over there, it's the same thing. So yeah, if you agitate that boss hen and then she runs over to get in a fight, all the turkeys that are there are going to run over because they want to see what happens. So curiosity thing, great way to get them in.
Absolutely. And
And
something
bait.
else. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And again,
And
all this is in theory. Every bird I've ever hunted acts completely different. And so none of this is like set in stone. Everything's just experience based. But another scenario that, again, we've talked about quite a bit is a tom gets hung up. We've talked about a tom getting hung up past decoys. But one thing I want to talk about is past physical obstruction. So actually, the last bird I killed was hung up basically for about an hour. My wife and I, she was kind of with me, just wanted to experience the day. So we were set up on the top of a ridge, giant field up there, and I just kept calling. And there was this tom that just in the bottom ones kept gobbling. Every note I made, he'd gobble, gobble, gobble. And I did that for about 45 minutes to an hour, hoping that eventually it would start working my direction. I pulled up my phone and started looking at a map. He's across the river. And so I snuck down, made a different play, and finally got him to cross the river. But just because a tom is hung up, it may not just be your decoys. It could be a fence. It could be a road. It could be a creek. It could be a river. There's a lot of physical obstructions that we as humans don't even think are physical obstructions, that a turkey is going to come walking across, see it, and he will literally just start strutting back and forth against that barrier. And so if you just continue to call and it sounds like that bird's not moving at all, you may want to try to circle around, reposition yourself a little bit, or again, look at your map, see if you can see any physical feature that may be causing that tom to hold up. I've heard stories that, sometimes it's just a giant tree that has fallen on the ground. Sometimes that's enough to just cause them. They're just so worked up on testosterone that they can't figure their way past it, and they just sit there and gobble back and forth, back and forth, back.
well, you also got to remember it's reversing nature, like you
Yep.
said earlier. So he's thinking that, hey, if I'm good enough, she's going to be coming to me. So it doesn't take much of a deterrent, I guess, to make him just stop there and wait and be like, "Are you coming?
Where are you?
Here."
And another scenario that can happen is you heard them on the roost, but you just never saw them. You never heard them fly down. You never heard them talking after they flew down. Normally, what that tells me is, one, I probably spooked them in some capacity, whether it was on my approach, whether they saw me when they flew down, whether I gave away my location with my calling, something like that. Or again, if you're hunting publicly and you have no idea what was running out there the night before, that's just the reality of it. So don't always get super bummed if you don't even see those birds off the roost. Again, he's usually roosting in there in that location so that he can go deal with those hens first thing in the morning. So don't put all your eggs in that kind of roost hunt basket, so to speak. But when a roost hunt works, it's awesome. All right, so we kind of talked about henned up gobblers quite a bit already. But again, all we're doing is really just trying to tick off that hen that tom happens to be with, hoping that we force her to come in with the tom or the jake directly in tow.
Yeah, and this can be tough. Like if you're really, and I have had birds like this, they're henned up and they're sticking to the middle of agricultural fields where you just can't get a shot. They're almost never in range. And then your primary tactic does need to be to get in tight to the roost and basically try to get them right before they get out into the open ag fields. And so that means getting out there extra early. And I've been there so early that I'm only moving when the bird's gobbling, right? So you got to be there super early. Bird gobbles, take 2 steps and just wait. Bird gobbles, take 2 steps and try to get. I mean, I'm not trying to sit under the tree that they're in, but hopefully get 50 to 60 yards away in the direction I think that they might be going, because I know I've hunted them the past 2 or 3 days and they're going out into the ag fields. They're not listening to calls, not worried, they're decoy shy, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of my only chance. And it's maybe not the most exciting way to hunt, but if it's your only chance, hey, it's got its own type of excitement to it, I guess.
Absolutely.
It's fun to be that close to birds
It
gobbling it
really
at the.
and we talked about the spit and drum earlier and how it's I actually think we had somebody drop a link in the chat or said that Shane Simpson, who I think is a famous dog tracker, I used to watch him on YouTube, has a good video that kind of illustrates that spit and drum. But that's another book. You're not going to hear that unless you are in their lap.
It's the lowest frequency sound in the wild in Illinois. So it's something that some people can't even really hear. You can almost feel it more than you can hear it. And you definitely can't hear it more than like maybe 150 yards away. It just doesn't carry that far.
And again, you can use some decoy strategies to try to address this henned up period where they're actively breeding. If you just see that morning after morning after morning, and maybe you're getting toward, maybe you're on your second to last day, second to last hunt, maybe you want to try to get a little more urgent or aggressive with your decoy and try to set up, essentially a breeding display to really force the issue that, hey, if you want to breed this hen, you have to come right now. And that can create just that last little bit of urgency that might force that bird to kind of come in inside your effective range and give you a shot. All right, a good question here just on henned up. If you've got a henned up tom, is another strategy to wait for mid-morning and see if the hens kick the tom away and call hunt them. Perfect transition. I couldn't have written that better myself. Absolutely yes. And again, this is why I have personally found the mid-morning period for me. And again, a lot of it's just the way we all individually hunt, that you just kind of naturally find your own niche, so to speak. The mid-morning has been so productive for me. And I think a lot of it is due to that. He'll go off with those hens that he slept, next to that night before that he roosted with. He'll deal with them in the morning. He'll go out, breed a few of them, go feed. When they start to kind of disperse in that mid-morning period, a lot of times you're going to see that tom start to then search and expand a little bit and start going to look for other hens. And that's when I found it to be really fun and really effective at getting back on these birds. You can use a couple different strategies. My biggest one is to go find the tallest, basically slope or high feature on that land I can find. Take a box call, which a box call just has a lot more volume than you can usually get with a slate or with a diaphragm. And again, we're talking mid-morning in Illinois here. It's usually windy. And so I want something that's going to cut through that wind a little bit. And so I'll get on kind of a peak or a hill, let that box call and just do a yelp sequence about as loud as I can and just listen for gobbles. And you're usually going to get a gobbler too. And then you can try to figure out, okay, is that on the property I'm on? So and so, and then put together a plan. So a lot of times that's been my favorite strategy, is to find these birds mid-morning when they're not necessarily expanding their range, but they're off doing their own thing a little bit. They're not right next to the hens. They're maybe searching, looking for additional hens. And I have found Jakes especially are super, super call responsive during the mid-morning. And again, I think that's because they know if there's a hen walking around in the mid-morning and she's not with a tom, she might actually be available for an immature bird. And so I found that mid-morning to be really good for those immature birds.
Just it can be so hot. I'd much rather
Yes, yes.
in the morning when it's nice and cool and get my bird and get home in the air conditioner before it climbs up over 80.
Yeah. And you certainly can. Yes, you can use a locator roost call to still get that shot gobble response. Now, I recommend if you're doing it mid morning to try to use something that's a little more natural for mid morning. So I'm certainly probably not going to use like an owl call at 10 o'clock in the morning, but that's normally when I'll use a crow call. But honestly, a crow call has been my favorite way to locate for. So it's easy to blow, it's loud, it carries. It seems to work quite well. So for me, I like to use the either just a big box call and really let that thing scream if it's windy, or try to force that shot gobble with a crow call.
The one problem I will say with crow calls is in a lot of areas we have such a high crow population that
They don't work
it
as
almost
well. Yeah.
white noise. Yeah, you hear just crows every minute, and so in those times I'll bring my waterfowl calls because a goose call it can be used day or night, and it's a little something different, and sometimes it's just enough to trigger that gobble. So that's me
And again,
though. I
you
just
can
like
use a gobble call too. I don't necessarily recommend it on public land, like we've talked about, for a host of different reasons. Again, every other hunter's listening for it. They're all going to start coming to you. But that can be another way mid morning that you can try to locate some birds is using just a gobble call. But again, be safety conscious if you do that. This is pretty much the exact same thing we just kind of said. Just try to find a new birds. That's the best part about turkey hunting is scouting is not as, I don't want to say it's not as important because it still is, but it's not near to the level of deer hunting. Like deer hunting, I'm trying to figure out, are they going to walk down that trail when the wind's blowing in this direction, this time of, all that. With this, turkeys give away their location really, really readily and really easy. And so a lot of times when I'm scouting, I'm more so scouting on just understanding the landscape and how I can navigate and move that landscape from area to area. If the turkey's down there, can I circle around and go this way, or am I going to do that and then run into, some kind of 15-foot, I don't know, drop off that I can't climb down or something like that. So a lot of times my scouting isn't necessarily for finding birds, but it's for understanding the landscape for scenarios like this in the mid morning where I'm just out there calling, trying to find a new bird, and I'm starting to try to make a plan on that bird.
Yeah, very different methodology from deer hunting. And deer hunting, your hunting success basically boils down to your scouting. You got to scout and figure out how the animals are going to use the landscape, and then just sit and wait and hope that you're right. And with
Yeah.
turkeys, because they're calling, you are basically up against each individual animal, and then figuring out how to attack that animal given the landscape that's in front of you. So to me, I much prefer turkey hunting in terms of just being a fun type of hunting over deer hunting. I mean, I don't know, 10 to 1. Obviously, I like to eat the deer a little bit better, and you get more meat off a deer. But in terms of fun hunting, if it wasn't for the ticks, holy cow, yeah, turkey would be might even be better than waterfowl. But the ticks, I think, put it under
Put it
waterfowl.
below for you. Yeah.
Ducks still win because of the ticks.
And one thing we do run into a lot during the spring is some adverse weather. Now, me personally, I'm not going to let the weather keep me, I'm not going to sleep in. And again, a lot of that comes down to opportunity. We're talking a 5 or 6 day segment that you may get to hunt. That's the only turkey hunting you get to do for an entire year. So for me, as long as it's safe for me to be out there, what I mean by that, there's no tornado weather, there's no hail, there's no lightning, I'm going to be out there. Rain, sleet, snow. I've hunted spring turkey in the snow. We don't get to do it often, but occasionally every other year, you'll get a weird, couple inches of snow. But I have found turkey hunting to be quite productive in the rain. And that's when if you're interested in using a ground blinds can be very good for that. Now, obviously, the best days are when there's no wind, it's sunny, the birds are going to be very active. They're going to be talking on the roost way more. But again, we're so limited in terms of opportunity that I'm not going to let a bad weather day personally keep me from going out unless, again, it's completely unsafe to do so. Because we get a lot of rain, and what the rain does is it will cause those birds to be a little bit more silent. They're usually still going to be moving around a little bit. Now, if it's super windy, I prefer those days over just a rainstorm that's just dumping rain. If it's a drizzly rain, I love it. If it's a windy, rainy day, there are some different strategies that I'll employ. And usually it's finding areas that are going to be wind protected. So find areas that if the winds are coming out of the west, maybe on the east side of a slope, you're going to find wildlife. So just think about all that when you're going through it. And one thing that it's really going to do is delay when they leave the roost. Because again, they're very much driven by the daylight. And so if the daylight looks different just because it's cloudy, overcast, it's going to be a little darker. It will delay that fly down quite a bit, sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes. And sometimes it may even cause that one bird to sit up there till 7:30 or so. I've definitely seen that. So just keep that in mind. Now, one thing that we should mention, and I'll kind of come back to some of these slides in a second, is calls don't always work wet. There are some style of turkey calls that do not work wet. And we will dive much deeper into this in the next webinar, the turkey calling one. But if I know I'm hunting in the rain, I'm not even going to bring a slate call. I'm not going to bring my box call. I'm going to bring either a crystal pot call, which is acrylic or glass with an acrylic striker, or a diaphragm call, because both of those will still work when they get wet. But a slate call or some of the box calls don't work at all when they get any amount of moisture. So keep that in mind if you are going to be hunting in rain. That is going to change your gear load out quite a bit. Anything to add on hunting in the rain, Curtis?
No, no, I've seen them up there a solid hour
Yeah,
after up though. So yeah, definitely don't spook them off the roost if you don't hear anything. Because I done that. I'm like, well, I get they surely are gone by now, and then I go to leave an hour after sun up, and I
they're
spook them
still
off
there.
up there.
Again, thunder and lightning. If you hear lightning, get the heck out of there. Not worth all that. But other than that, I'm going to be out there. Now, what is really cool, and if you're new to turkey hunting, you've probably heard the term thunder chicken. And they kind of get that name because a clap of thunder will actually cause that shock gobble response. So that is kind of cool. If you're ever out there, again, start heading for the car if you do hear that. But it is pretty cool.
Yeah, don't
Good
miss.
question. For windy days, would you use sign more than sound to find birds? For me personally, I don't necessarily look for a lot of sign for turkey. The only sign I will typically look for is if I'm trying to find a roost. A lot of times you can see you'll just walk through the woods and you'll see feathers, and then you'll look closer and you'll see piles of just poop everywhere, where it just looks like poop was just raining down from the skies. That's really the only sign I personally really ever look for. Obviously, you're going to have less. You're not going to hear as well if it is rainy. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't say I shift my strategies to look for more sign in any way, shape, or form. How about you, Curtis?
I mean, I could see it a little bit just in that if it is a really rainy day and you're going to do a blind style hunt, I am going to go more towards a deer style hunt where I'm going to try to get in what I think is the best ambush location and just sit and wait. And so in that, maybe you are using a little bit of sign because maybe, oh, I've seen a ton of turkey tracks here. Every time I go, there's a new turkey feather here. I know they're using this trail. Um, so maybe, but yeah, it's like turkey sign, you find a lot less of it than deer sign. Just they leave a lot shallower track. They don't last on the landscape as long, and their feathers do randomly shed all over the place. You can find them, but guess what? They blow all over the place too. So the feathers you found, it might have, you don't know that it actually came from that exact spot always. So, but I could see it a little bit because yeah, it's more of an ambush style hunt when it's rainy, or it can be anyway.
And for me, one of the advantages of like a really drizzly day where it's not super windy, you're still getting decent sound coverage, is you can get away with a lot of movement. Now, not I shouldn't say movement. You can get away with a lot more noise. So you can walk through the woods. The woods are going to be a lot quieter. Everything's going to be a little bit wetter. It's not going to be as crunchy, and so you can use that to your advantage too. And when it's particularly rainy, I actually transition to what I would call more of like a spot, and very similar to like a Western hunt where I'm going to try to glass some of these fields. I'm going to try to glass some of these areas from afar. So I may just kind of sneak around the woods, get on a ridge side, and I'm literally just going to scan those fields, scan some of those open areas, and see if those turkeys are actively using them. So I found that to probably be the most common strategy I use during the rain is just cover as much distance as I can, call often, look, and hear. It does make it tougher, I won't lie. But again, there's so little opportunity that I'm not going to waste a day or two just because it's a little bit rainier, a little tougher. A couple additional tips, kind of as we wrap up here. One thing I really want to emphasize, and we will talk this a lot at the next work or the next webinar next week is do not overcall. Overcalling is something that you'll hear a lot, especially on public, and you'll hear people call nonstop. And again, it's fun. It can be addicting. It's usually not going to ruin your hunt, but what it could do is, again, turkeys are good at picking out where a sound is coming from. So it just opens up more opportunity for that bird to really pinpoint where your location is at. And it also just creates more opportunity for them to pick up on your movement, right? When you're turkey calling, you're moving a stylus, you're moving a striker, or you're moving your mouth, or there's some movement there. And so the more you call, the more likely they are to kind of pick up on just those little bits of movement. Always pattern your shells and gun. I know that was talked about quite a bit in Turkey 101, but also bring extra shells with you. You don't have to bring, 30 or 40 shells. We're not preparing for the zombie apocalypse here, but bring a couple extra. Always good to have with you. Now, we've emphasized this concept of movement, but don't be afraid to move. And what I mean by that is not when a bird's in your area, but when you're not seeing activity or action, don't be afraid to try something different. Get up, walk a couple hundred yards, and try calling and just see. Movement, even if you're calling at the same bird that you were trying to call at before, if it sounds like your sound is moving, again, that just adds realism to the whole scenario. He was hearing this hen over here. Well, now it's over here. That may cause a little bit more. Now he may be a little bit more interested. So sometimes just little movements like that can really pay off if you have a locked up tom or a henned up tom. So keep that in mind. Anything to add there, Curtis?
Yeah, just in general, it's the double putt at the time of shot to get, if you need a turkey to stretch its neck, its head way out to give you that good ethical shot. We don't want to take a shot when it's strutting. Its head and neck is tucked against its body. Not a good shot, and you're going to get a bunch of BBs into the meat when it's like that. So a little put is an alarm putt, so you got to be ready to take the shot just within a second of doing that, but that'll get them to really stretch that head up and give you a good ethical shot.
You can almost view it like deer hunting. We've all been there, at full draw, meh, to get that deer to stop. The second you do that, you better be ready to fire because it's going to happen quick. Turkey's the same way. I'm not putting until I'm literally on that head and just waiting for it to pop up a little bit. Good point. Again, don't be afraid to hunt without decoys. If your decoys just for some reason you keep seeing birds that are hung up 100 yards and they're just not interested in coming in, try without the decoys. These birds, they're pretty smart. Again, they have really good eyesight, and there's a lot of research out there that shows that they see in an entirely different spectrum than we will ever see, and that sometimes these decoys just look fake to them. So keep that in mind. One other, I think, really important thing that we'll kind of wrap up with, and you guys can kind of read through some of these. But one point I really want to emphasize, and it's something I'm still guilty of, is we're all, again, listening for gobbles when we're out there. But there are many, many times where a Tom or Jake will just sneak in who has been silent the entire morning. So just because you're not hearing Toms, you're not hearing Jakes respond to your calls, it does not necessarily mean that they're either not interested or that they're not around. There's been many instances where I'm sitting here calling to a bird across the field, and I'm sitting there watching it, getting ready. We're working, we're having this conversation back and forth, and then all of a sudden I hear of the spitting drum. And again, you're only hearing that if the bird's within 30, 40 yards usually. And guess what? There's a turkey sneaking in directly behind you. So again, just because you're not hearing responses to your calls, it doesn't necessarily mean they're not around. They will, for some reason, just occasionally go completely silent on you. So don't let that discourage you.
Very common with the Jakes and the submature Toms, because every time they talk, they could get beat up, right? Because there's a bigger, badder Tom around there, so they got to play very nonchalant, very quiet, like ninjas. And yeah, I feel like with Jake, more often than not, I never hear them. They appear, And nothing wrong with Jakes.
Not at all. I've killed more Jakes in my life than anything. And again, yeah, they taste the same.
It tastes better. It's a younger
Honestly,
bird.
yeah.
You do more stuff with them, I think. So, I definitely don't turn down a Jake. Not for me anyway.
The way I like to view it, I will never pass up something that I would be happy to harvest on the last day of my season. If the opportunity presents itself on day one, yeah, it kind of sucks that now my hunt's over, but I'm usually gonna take that opportunity. Yeah, so we'll kind of wrap up here. Again, you can keep trying to locate toms throughout the day as the day progresses, and maybe you blow out a tom, he runs off, he flies off, you scare him, get back on the saddle, sit there for 30 minutes, let things calm down, and go try again. Try to find and locate another bird. That's the fun part about turkey hunting. Like deer hunting, if you're in your spot that, this is the spot, the buck's going to be here, and you blow out a doe in the morning and she starts screaming and screaming and a lot of times that entire day's done. You're just that area is kind of blown out. Turkey, it's completely different because you get to really move. You're interacting with different birds. So don't give up. Learn a lot. You're going to learn a lot just from being out there. You're going to mess up. It's very much more of an art than a science. Every bird you interact with is going to act differently, going to respond to calls differently. And so it will take some experience and take some time out there. I promise you, it's definitely worth it. Any last words of wisdom from you, Curtis?
Just generally, turkey seasons coincide with morel mushroom season as well. So don't forget to bring your mesh sack because definitely check your area regs because a lot of these IDNR sites you can't mushroom hunt until after one, so after turkey season. But if you're on private land or on federal land, or if you're out roosting birds, bust out your mushroom sack because check by the old dying elm trees and you might just pick up a few morels while you're out there, which goes real good with fried turkey schnitzel if you ask me.
I like it. Awesome. One thing we want to give a quick plug to is the National Wild Turkey Federation. They're a great organization. They've pretty much helped us bring turkeys back from the brink of extinction. That's one thing a lot of people don't realize. Not what 60, 70 years ago, there wasn't a single wild turkey left in Illinois. They were completely extirpated from the state. And it took a conscious effort from biologists, from land managers, to organizations like the NWTF to raise funds to start managing the habitat and to bring these birds back. And so now we have this robust population that, again, we get to hunt. We basically went from 0 birds in the 1950s to now the population estimates are between 100 and 150,000. I mean, that's an immense success story. So if you're looking to meet like-minded individuals, maybe you want to bounce some ideas off of other folks who aren't us. Again, we're always happy to help as much as possible, but definitely check out the National Wild Turkey Federation. They have chapters all across the state. Great folks. They do a lot of really good work. So definitely check them out. But again, that's all we have. So thanks for joining us tonight. We hope to see you at our next webinar, which is next week. It's on turkey calling. So we're going to really go through how to make different vocalizations using a variety of different calls. We're going to go over techniques, go over when to use what vocalization. And we're also going to open up to a general Q&A. So after you kind of reflect and think through what we've learned, the past couple webinars, maybe you watch the recordings that I'll send out tomorrow. Think of some questions, come join us. It's going to be a very kind of relaxed evening. We're just going to sit around, talk turkey a little bit, and have a good time to get ready for the upcoming season. So if you haven't registered for that, definitely do so. Ooh, I like that idea, Mike. Yeah. So we got a quick comment, Curtis. I hope you guys will consider letting us demonstrate our calling and give feedback. I think that's a great idea. Next at that webinar on Tuesday, open it up if people are interested. Let you practice a little bit, tell you what we think of your calling. I think that's a great idea. That'd be fun.
Yeah, really stretch the capabilities of Zoom's recording. It usually freaks out right in the beginning when we start doing calls. We have to hit a couple buttons so that Zoom doesn't freak out because it's got these like automatic noise cancellation things. And so I think when it thinks a goat is dying in the background, it mutes it.
We'll figure it out, though. That'll be fun. I like that. Yeah.
Good idea.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone have a wonderful evening. Hope to see you guys at future events. And again, if you have any questions, reach out to us at any time. Send us pictures, send us stories. We love talking hunting, so we're happy to answer any of your questions or just again tell stories. We love it. So thanks for coming out tonight and have a good evening.
Good luck, everybody. Watch out for ticks.
Yeah, that time of year. All right. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.